When Virginia's 2005 cold case was finally solved, the arrest sent shockwaves through Richmond that no one saw coming. Taylor Marie Behl was just 17 when she told her roommate she was going for a quick drive on September 5, 2005. The VCU freshman with bright eyes and boundless trust never came back. Her abandoned car surfaced in Virginia Beach, but Taylor had vanished into the night. For weeks, hundreds searched the countryside, while her mother pleaded for answers, and detectives followed digital breadcrumbs to a disturbing connection. They found Benjamin Fawley, a 38-year-old photographer who had been messaging Taylor online. But it wasn't until investigators tracked him to a remote patch of land in Matthews County that the horrifying truth emerged from a shallow grave. After 3 years of court battles, Fawley's guilty plea finally brought justice. But how does a mother heal from losing her daughter to a predator hiding in plain sight? Before we get into the story, drop a comment with your country and the time right now. The key felt cold in Taylor Marie Behl's palm as she grabbed it from her desk. September 5, 2005 had been like any other day at Virginia Commonwealth University. Classes, lunch with friends, studying in the library. Her roommate looked up from her textbook as Taylor headed for the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Just for a drive?" Taylor replied, her voice light and carefree. "Need some air, won't be long." The 17-year-old freshman had that restless energy that comes with newfound freedom. College was everything she dreamed it would be. New friends, new experiences, new independence. She'd been at VCU for just a few weeks, but already Richmond felt like home. Taylor tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and smiled at her roommate. She was petite but carried herself with confidence. Her bright blue eyes reflected an openness to the world that drew people to her, naturally. Photography was her passion, and she loved exploring the city with her camera, capturing moments of beauty in unexpected places. The dorm hallway was quiet as she walked toward the exit. Most students were settled in for the evening, either studying or relaxing after a long day. Taylor pushed through the heavy door and stepped into the warm Virginia evening. The air still held summer's humidity, but there was a hint of autumn change coming. She climbed into her Honda Civic and turned the key. The engine hummed to life, and she pulled out of the parking lot. The city lights were beginning to twinkle as darkness approached. She had no destination in mind, just the simple pleasure of driving and thinking. But as Taylor drove into that September night, she had no way of knowing she would never see her dorm room again. The key in her pocket would become evidence. Her roommate's casual question would haunt her for years to come. The roommate's first worry came around midnight. Taylor had said she wouldn't be long, but hours had passed. She tried calling Taylor's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The cheerful recording of Taylor's voice asking callers to leave a message now sounded ominous in the silence of their dorm room. By 2 a.m., real fear set in. The roommate called again and again. Each unanswered ring felt like a weight dropping in her stomach. She paced the small room, looking out the window for any sign of Taylor's car, returning to the parking lot below. Dawn broke gray and overcast. The roommate had barely slept, jumping at every sound in the hallway, hoping to hear Taylor's key in the lock. When 8 a.m. came and went with no word, she knew something was terribly wrong. She called Taylor's mother. The phone rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. "Mrs. Behl, this is Taylor's roommate. I'm sorry to call so early, but Taylor never came back last night." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "What do you mean she never came back?" "She went for a drive around 7 yesterday evening, said she'd be right back. I've been calling her phone all night, but it just goes to voicemail." Taylor's mother felt her world tilt. Her daughter was responsible, careful. She didn't stay out all night without calling. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Within an hour, Taylor's parents were in their car, racing the 3 hours from their home to Richmond. They called the police from the road, reporting their daughter missing. The investigation would begin immediately, but already precious time had been lost. The unanswered phone continued to ring throughout the morning as family, friends, and soon police tried desperately to reach Taylor. Each missed call was another step deeper into a nightmare that would consume them all. The flyers went up everywhere. Taylor's smiling face looked out from telephone poles, bulletin boards, storefront windows, and dorm room doors across Richmond. Her parents had driven through the night to reach VCU, and by noon they were working with police to organize a massive search effort. Missing, Taylor Marie Behl, 17, VCU freshman. The flyers read in bold letters. Below was her photo, the same bright smile that had lit up their family dinner table just weeks ago when they dropped her off for her first semester. She looked so young, so trusting, so vulnerable. Virginia Commonwealth University investigators took the case seriously from the start. A missing college student always triggered immediate action, especially when the circumstances were this unusual. Detective Sarah Mitchell had seen too many cases like this, and she knew the first 48 hours were critical. "We need everyone who knows Taylor to think back to Monday evening," Detective Mitchell told the growing crowd of volunteers gathered in the campus student center. "Anyone she might have mentioned meeting, anywhere she might have gone, any detail, no matter how small." Taylor's mother stood beside the detective, her face pale but determined. She held a stack of flyers against her chest, like a shield against despair. Her faith was strong, but fear gnawed at the edges of her composure. "Please," she said to the assembled crowd of students and faculty, "if you've seen her, if you know anything, please call the number on the flyer. She's my baby. She's just 17. The students responded immediately. Within hours, search teams were combing every corner of campus and the surrounding neighborhoods. Volunteers drove the streets slowly, looking in alleys and parking lots. Others called local hospitals and checked with friends at other colleges. But as the day wore on with no sign of Taylor, the awful reality began to settle in. This wasn't a case of a teenager staying out too late or forgetting to call home. Something terrible had happened to Taylor Marie Behl. The call came at 6 a.m. on September 8th, 3 days after Taylor's disappearance. A Virginia Beach police officer had found her car in a residential parking lot more than 100 miles from where she was last seen. Detective Mitchell drove to Virginia Beach immediately, her heart sinking with each mile. An abandoned car this far from home was never a good sign. When she arrived at the scene, she found Taylor's Honda Civic sitting in a nondescript apartment complex parking lot, looking completely ordinary, except for one terrible fact. Taylor was nowhere to be found. The car was unlocked. Taylor's purse sat on the passenger seat, her wallet and ID still inside. Her camera, the expensive one she'd saved for months to buy, lay on the back seat. No signs of struggle, no obvious evidence of violence. Just an empty car that should have contained a 17-year-old girl. "Looks like someone just parked it here and walked away," the Virginia Beach officer said grimly. Detective Mitchell put on latex gloves and carefully examined the interior. The gas tank was nearly empty. The car had been driven hard and fast from Richmond to the coast. But by whom and why? FBI agents joined the investigation that afternoon. The case had crossed state lines now, and federal resources were crucial. Agent David Park had worked dozens of missing person cases, but something about this one felt especially urgent. "The fact that the car was left here suggests the perpetrator is familiar with the area," Agent Park observed. "This isn't random. Someone brought the car here for a reason." Taylor's mother collapsed when she heard the news. Her daughter's car, found abandoned 100 miles away without Taylor inside, could only mean one thing: someone had taken her baby. The hope that Taylor might have simply gotten lost or had car trouble evaporated completely. The Virginia Beach discovery marked a turning point in the case. This was no longer a missing person investigation. This was a kidnapping, and possibly much worse. The FBI tech specialists worked through the night, carefully extracting every piece of data from Taylor's computer. Her roommate had given permission for the search, and investigators knew that in 2005, a teenager's digital life often held the key to understanding their real world. What they found was both typical and troubling. Taylor had been active on various online forums and social media platforms. She'd been building a portfolio of her photography work and connecting with other young artists. But among the innocent conversations and homework files, investigators found something that made them look closer. Agent Park studied the screen as the computer forensics specialist scrolled through Taylor's email and instant message history. There were conversations with several older men, people she'd met through photography forums and social networking sites. Most seemed harmless, but one name kept appearing: Benjamin Fawley. "Who is this guy?" Agent Park asked. The specialist pulled up Fawley's online profile. He was 38 years old and listed his occupation as photographer. His profile showed dozens of photos of young women, all appearing to be in their late teens or early 20s. Some of the images had an unsettling quality, taken without the subject seeming aware they were being photographed. "He's been messaging Taylor regularly for the past month," the specialist reported. "Look at this." The conversation threads revealed that Fawley had been cultivating a relationship with Taylor, offering to help her with her photography and suggesting they meet in person. He presented himself as a mentor, someone who could help advance her artistic career. Detective Mitchell read over the messages, her stomach tightening with each exchange. Fawley's messages were carefully crafted to seem helpful and fatherly, but there was an underlying tone that felt predatory. He asked personal questions about Taylor's family, her schedule, her living situation. "We need to find this Fawley immediately," Detective Mitchell said. The digital breadcrumbs were leading them somewhere dark, and everyone in the investigation room could feel it. Benjamin Fawley lived in a cluttered apartment in Richmond, just 15 minutes from VCU's campus. When investigators knocked on his door on September 9th, he answered with the wary look of someone who had been expecting this moment. "Benjamin Fawley?" Detective Mitchell showed her badge. "We'd like to ask you some questions about Taylor Behl." Fawley was tall and thin, with thinning brown hair and nervous eyes that darted around rather than making direct contact. He invited the investigators in, but his hands shook as he cleared photography equipment from chairs so they could sit down. The apartment was a photographer's workshop. Cameras, lenses, lighting equipment, and computer monitors filled every available surface. Hundreds of photographs covered the walls, almost all of them featuring young women. Some appeared to be professional portrait sessions, but others looked like candid shots taken without the subject's knowledge. "You know Taylor Behl?" Agent Park asked, settling into a chair surrounded by the images. "Yes, I know Taylor," Fawley replied, his voice carefully controlled. "She's interested in photography. I've been giving her some advice. When did you last see her?" Fawley paused, running his hand through his hair. "I'm not sure. Maybe a week ago? We met for coffee to discuss her portfolio." Detective Mitchell made notes while studying Fawley's body language. He was clearly nervous, but that didn't necessarily mean guilt. Many people became anxious when questioned by police, even when they'd done nothing wrong. "Her car was found in Virginia Beach," Agent Park said, watching Fawley's reaction carefully. "Do you know why it might be there? Virginia Beach?" Fawley's surprise seemed genuine. "No, I have no idea. That's terrible. Is she okay?" The investigators spent 2 hours questioning Fawley, but his story remained consistent. He claimed to have been home alone the evening Taylor disappeared, working on photographs in his apartment. He had no alibi that could be verified, but he also had no obvious connection to Virginia Beach. Still, something felt wrong about Benjamin Fawley, and Detective Mitchell was determined to keep digging. The search had grown beyond anything Richmond had seen in recent memory. By September 12th, more than 500 volunteers were combing through forests, parks, and waterways in a methodical grid pattern that stretched across 3 counties. The Virginia Commonwealth University investigators had coordinated with the FBI, Virginia State Police, and local search and rescue teams to create a comprehensive search plan. The map covered hundreds of square miles, each section carefully marked and assigned to teams of searchers. Taylor's mother stood in the command center, a collection of folding tables set up in a VCU parking lot, watching the organized chaos around her. Radio reports crackled in from search teams, each negative report another weight on her heart. Grid 47 clear. Moving to Grid 48, K9 units report no hits in the Riverside section. Helicopter search of the warehouse district complete. Nothing visible. Each empty grid was colored green on the master map. Green meant searched, cleared, no sign of Taylor. The map was becoming a patchwork of green squares, each one representing another place where her daughter wasn't. Volunteers came from everywhere. Students who had never met Taylor but felt connected to her story. Parents who couldn't imagine losing their own children. Retired police officers who donated their time and expertise. Local businesses provided food and water for the searchers. FBI Agent Park studied the map, trying to think like a predator. If someone had taken Taylor, where would they go? The Virginia Beach connection suggested someone familiar with that area, but the vast territory between Richmond and the coast offered countless hiding places. "We need to expand the search radius," he told Detective Mitchell. "If this Fawley is involved, he might have property or connections we don't know about yet." Taylor's mother overheard and approached them. "Please," she said quietly, "don't give up on her. I know she's out there somewhere. I can feel it." The map continued to grow, each new grid representing both hope and heartbreak. The tip came from an unexpected source. On October 4th, investigators received a call from someone who knew Benjamin Fawley and had been following the news coverage. The caller mentioned that Fawley had access to remote property in Matthews County, Virginia, a rural area about 60 miles east of Richmond. Agent Park and Detective Mitchell drove to Matthews County immediately, joined by state police and forensic specialists. The property was isolated, surrounded by woods and accessible only by a narrow dirt road. It was exactly the kind of place someone might go to hide evidence. The search began at dawn on October 5th. K9 units spread out across the property while investigators examined every building and outbuilding on the land. It was slow, methodical work, but everyone involved knew this might be their best lead. The cadaver dog alerted near a patch of disturbed earth behind an old barn. The area was partially hidden by overgrown vegetation, but the trained animal's behavior left no doubt. Something was buried there. Detective Mitchell felt her heart stop as the forensics team began their careful excavation. Taylor's mother and father had driven to the scene and were waiting at the command post, holding on to each other and praying for a miracle they knew wasn't coming. The first piece of evidence emerged within an hour. A piece of clothing that matched what Taylor had been wearing the night she disappeared. Then, personal items. Finally, What everyone had feared but hoped they wouldn't find: human remains. The identification would take time, but Detective Mitchell already knew. After a month of searching, hoping, and praying, they had found Taylor Marie Behl. She was not coming home. Agent Park made the long walk back to where Taylor's parents waited. He had delivered this kind of news too many times before, but it never got easier. Their faces when he approached told him they already knew. "We found her," he said quietly. Taylor's mother's knees buckled, and her husband caught her as she fell. The confirmation came 2 days later. The remains found in Matthews County were definitively identified as Taylor Marie Behl. The 17-year-old who had driven out for a simple evening drive had been murdered and buried in a shallow grave 60 miles from home. VCU's campus transformed overnight into a place of mourning. Students who had searched for Taylor, posted flyers, and held on to hope now faced the devastating reality of her death. A memorial appeared spontaneously on the quad. Hundreds of candles, flowers, photos, and handwritten notes from people whose lives had been touched by Taylor's story. "She was going to change the world with her camera," wrote one student who had shared a photography class with Taylor. "Now we have to change it for her." The candlelight vigil that evening drew more than 1,000 people. Taylor's mother, supported by family and friends, managed to speak to the crowd despite her overwhelming grief. "Taylor believed in the goodness of people," she said, her voice breaking but strong. "She trusted too easily, loved too openly, but that wasn't a flaw. That was what made her beautiful. Don't let what happened to her make you stop trusting, stop loving, stop believing in goodness." Detective Mitchell stood at the back of the crowd, watching the sea of candle flames flicker in the October darkness. Each light represented someone who had been changed by Taylor's death, someone who would carry her memory forward. The investigation was far from over. They had found Taylor's body, but they still needed to prove who had killed her and why. Benjamin Fawley remained their primary suspect, but building a case that would hold up in court required more evidence than they currently had. As the vigil ended and people slowly walked away, carrying their candles with them, the campus felt forever changed. A young woman's trust had been betrayed, her life stolen, her dreams buried in rural Virginia soil, but her memory would burn bright in the hearts of everyone who had searched for her. The forensic pathologist's report arrived 3 weeks after Taylor's body was discovered. Dr. Emily Chen had performed thousands of autopsies, but this case, a 17-year-old girl whose life had been cut short, weighed heavily on her as she completed her examination. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Taylor had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, resulting in massive skull fractures and brain injury. The pattern of injuries indicated this was not an accident but a deliberate and violent attack. Detective Mitchell read the report in the quiet of her office, her jaw tightening with each clinical detail. The autopsy revealed other disturbing evidence. Taylor had been alive for some time after the initial assault. She had suffered, and she had fought for her life. Agent Park joined Detective Mitchell to review the findings. The medical evidence contradicted every story Benjamin Fawley had told them. He had claimed Taylor's death was accidental, that she had fallen or hurt herself somehow. The autopsy made it clear this was murder. "We need to bring him in again," Agent Park said, this time for questioning about homicide. The forensic evidence was damning, but they still needed to build a complete case. Fawley's connection to the Matthews County property had to be established beyond doubt. His movements on the night of September 5th needed to be reconstructed. Most importantly, they needed to understand exactly how he had lured Taylor to her death. Taylor's mother was informed of the autopsy results by phone. The clinical details of her daughter's final moments were almost too much to bear, but she also felt a fierce satisfaction that the truth was finally emerging. Taylor had not simply disappeared into the night. Someone had deliberately taken her life, and now that person would face justice. Dr. Chen's report became the foundation for the murder case against Benjamin Fawley. Science had given voice to a young woman who could no longer speak for herself, and that voice was demanding accountability for what had been done to her. Benjamin Fawley was arrested on October 28, 2005, at his Richmond apartment. Detective Mitchell and Agent Park arrived with a warrant and a team of officers, prepared for any possibility. They had spent weeks building their case, and now it was time to bring Taylor's killer to justice. Fawley answered the door in pajamas and a bathrobe, his hair disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed. He had clearly not been sleeping well since Taylor's body was discovered. When Detective Mitchell showed him the arrest warrant, his face went completely white. "Benjamin Fawley, you're under arrest for the murder of Taylor Marie Behl," she said, reading him his rights as Agent Park placed the handcuffs around his wrists. The metal cuffs clicked shut with a sound that echoed through the apartment hallway. Several neighbors had emerged from their doors to watch the arrest, and word spread quickly through the building that the man who lived in 4B had been charged with killing that college girl. As they led Fawley to the police car, he finally spoke. "I want a lawyer." "I'm not saying anything without a lawyer." The perp walk to the car was captured by news cameras that had been alerted to the arrest. Richmond's media had been following Taylor's case intensively, and Fawley's arrest was the lead story on every local news station that evening. Taylor's mother watched the footage from her living room, seeing for the first time the man who had taken her daughter's life. He looked so ordinary, so unremarkable. How could someone who appeared so normal have done something so evil? The handcuffs represented the beginning of a legal process that would take years to complete. Fawley's arrest was just the first step toward justice for Taylor. There would be hearings, motions, plea negotiations, and possibly a trial. The family's ordeal was far from over, but for the first time since September 5th, Taylor's mother felt something that resembled hope. The man who had murdered her daughter was in custody, and the system would now work to hold him accountable. The legal system moved with frustrating slowness. Fawley's arraignment was scheduled for November 2005, but his defense attorney immediately requested delays. Motion after motion was filed, each one pushing the case further into the future. By spring 2006, Taylor's family had attended dozens of court hearings, most of which lasted only minutes before being continued to another date. Each postponement felt like another betrayal, another way the system was failing their daughter. Why does it take so long? Taylor's mother asked the prosecutor after yet another delay. We know he did it. The evidence is clear. Why can't we just get justice for Taylor? Commonwealth's attorney Robert Hayes understood the family's frustration, but he also knew that building an airtight case took time. Fawley's defense team was mounting an aggressive challenge to every piece of evidence, and the prosecution had to be prepared for every possible argument. We get one chance to get this right, Hayes explained. If we rush and make mistakes, he could walk free. I won't let that happen to Taylor. The court calendar became a constant presence in the family's life. Dates circled in red, each one representing another step toward resolution or another disappointment. Taylor's mother kept the calendar on her refrigerator, crossing off days and counting down to the next hearing. 2006 turned into 2007, and still the case dragged on. Fawley remained in jail, unable to make bail, but the legal proceedings seemed endless. His lawyers challenged the search of the Matthews County property, questioned the validity of the forensic evidence, and argued that their client's rights had been violated during the investigation. Each motion required a response from the prosecution, each response required time to prepare, and each hearing meant another day that Taylor's killer had not been held fully accountable for his crime. The family learned to measure time differently, not in months or seasons, but in court dates and legal deadlines. Justice moved slowly, but they had to believe it was moving. The evidence presented in pre-trial hearings revealed the true scope of Benjamin Fawley's predatory behavior. Investigators had seized his computers, cameras, and thousands of photographs from his apartment, and what they found painted a disturbing picture of a man obsessed with young women. Detective Mitchell testified about the evidence during a suppression hearing in early 2007. The courtroom was packed with reporters and members of the public who had followed Taylor's case from the beginning. We found over 3,000 photographs of young women on the defendant's computers, she testified. Many appeared to be taken without the subject's knowledge. Some were taken with telephoto lenses from considerable distances. The photos showed college-age women walking across campus, sitting in cafes, exercising in parks. Fawley had been systematically stalking and photographing young women throughout Richmond, building what could only be described as a collection of potential victims. Taylor's mother sat in the front row of the courtroom, forcing herself to listen to every detail. Learning about Fawley's behavior was horrifying, but it also helped her understand how her trusting daughter had become his target. The prosecution also presented evidence of Fawley's online communications with multiple young women. He had used his photography hobby as a way to connect with potential victims, offering to help with their portfolios or take professional headshots. He presented himself as a mentor and father figure, Commonwealth's attorney Hayes explained to the court, but his real interest was clearly predatory. Taylor Behl was not his first target. She was simply the one who trusted him enough to meet him in person. The defense objected to much of the evidence, arguing that their client's photography hobby was being mischaracterized, but the sheer volume of material and the pattern of behavior it revealed was damning. For Taylor's family, the evidence confirmed their worst fears about the man who had killed their daughter. He was not someone who had made a terrible mistake in a moment of passion. He was a predator who had deliberately hunted their child. Christmas 2006 was the first holiday season since Taylor's death. Her family gathered as they always had, but the empty chair at the dinner table made every moment feel incomplete. They had set a place for Taylor anyway. Her mother couldn't bear to leave her out completely. She should be here complaining about my cooking, Taylor's father said quietly, trying to inject some levity into the heavy atmosphere. She should be here showing us pictures from her latest photography project, her mother added, touching the empty chair's back. The holidays had always been Taylor's favorite time of year. She loved decorating, cooking with her mother, and taking family photos that captured everyone together. This year the camera sat unused on the counter, Extended family tried to help, bringing dishes and sharing memories of Taylor. But every story, every mention of her name, was a reminder that she would never again run down the stairs on Christmas morning or help her mother set the table for holiday dinner. The legal case continued to drag on through the holidays. Fawley remained in jail, but his trial had been postponed again until spring 2007. The family spent Christmas knowing that justice for Taylor was still months away. "I keep expecting her to walk through that door," her mother confided to a close friend. "I know she's gone, but part of me can't accept that she's really not coming home." The empty chair became a symbol of everything that had been taken from them. Not just Taylor's life, but all the future moments they would never share. Graduations, career achievements, possibly a wedding and grandchildren. An entire lifetime of experiences had been stolen when Fawley took their daughter's life. After dinner, they held hands around the table and said a prayer for Taylor. The chair remained empty, but her presence filled the room through their memories and their love. By early 2008, Commonwealth's attorney Hayes knew his case was strong, but he also knew that murder trials were always risky. Juries could be unpredictable, and Fawley's defense team was experienced and aggressive. When they approached him about a plea deal, he had to consider whether it might be the best path to justice for Taylor. The plea negotiations were conducted in the judge's chambers, away from the public and media attention that had surrounded every aspect of the case. Fawley's attorneys argued that their client would accept responsibility for Taylor's death in exchange for a reduced charge. Second-degree murder, the defense attorney proposed, 30 years, with possibility of parole after 20. Hayes felt his stomach turn. The idea of Fawley potentially being released after 20 years felt like a betrayal of Taylor's memory. But he also knew that a plea deal would guarantee conviction and spare Taylor's family the trauma of a lengthy trial. He met with Taylor's parents to discuss the proposal. They sat in his office, holding hands and listening as he explained the pros and cons of accepting a plea versus going to trial. "If we go to trial, there's always a chance of acquittal," Hayes explained honestly. "The evidence is strong, but defense attorneys are skilled at creating reasonable doubt. A plea deal guarantees he goes to prison." Taylor's mother was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Will he admit what he did? Will he say he killed my daughter?" "Yes," Hayes confirmed. "He would have to allocate to the court, which means confessing to the crime in detail. Then we'll take it," she said. "I need to hear him say what he did to Taylor. I need him to admit it in court." The legal documents were drawn up over the following weeks. On February 15, 2008, Benjamin Fawley would stand before a judge and plead guilty to second-degree murder in the death of Taylor Marie Behl. February 15, 2008, dawned cold and gray in Richmond. The courthouse was packed with reporters, family members, and citizens who had followed Taylor's case for more than 2 years. This was the day justice would finally be served. Judge Patricia Williams called the court to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Benjamin Fawley stood before her in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by his defense attorneys. For the first time since his arrest, he would have to speak about what he had done to Taylor Behl. "Mr. Fawley," Judge Williams began, "you are here to enter a plea to the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Taylor Marie Behl. How do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor," Fawley replied, his voice barely audible. "I need you to tell this court what you did," the judge continued. "In your own words, describe your actions on September 5, 2005. Fawley cleared his throat and began to speak. His confession was halting and emotionless, but it confirmed what investigators had long suspected. He had lured Taylor to meet him under the pretense of discussing photography. He had taken her to the remote property in Matthews County. When she tried to leave, he had attacked her. Taylor's mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she finally heard the truth about her daughter's final moments. It was everything she had feared and more. When Fawley finished his confession, Judge Williams asked if he understood the consequences of his plea. He did. 30 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20. "Before I impose sentence," the judge said, "does the victim's family wish to make a statement?" Taylor's mother stood on shaking legs and approached the podium. She looked directly at Fawley for the first time, her voice strong despite her tears. "You took my beautiful daughter from this world, but you cannot take her from my heart. May God forgive you, because I don't know if I ever can." Judge Williams raised her gavel and brought it down with finality. "Benjamin Fawley, you are hereby sentenced to 30 years in the Virginia Department of Corrections." The crowd of reporters and cameras was waiting as Taylor's family emerged from the courthouse. After more than 2 years of court hearings, delays, and legal maneuvering, justice had finally been served. Benjamin Fawley was going to prison for 30 years for murdering their daughter. Commonwealth's attorney Hayes stood with the family on the courthouse steps, reading a brief statement to the assembled media. The February wind whipped around them, but Taylor's mother stood straight and strong as she prepared to speak. "Today brings some measure of closure to our family," she began, her voice carrying clearly, despite the wind. Taylor can finally rest in peace, knowing that the man who took her life has been held accountable for his actions. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, reporters, supporters, and community members who had followed Taylor's story from the beginning. "But no sentence can bring back my daughter," she continued. "No amount of time in prison can undo the pain our family has endured. We will carry this loss for the rest of our lives." Detective Mitchell and Agent Park stood at the back of the crowd, watching the family they had worked so hard to serve. The investigation had consumed their lives for years, and seeing the case finally resolved brought a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Taylor was 17 years old when she died. Taylor's father spoke for the first time publicly since the arrest. She had her whole life ahead of her. Dreams to pursue, love to give, contributions to make to this world. That was all taken away by one man's evil actions. The family thanked the investigators, prosecutors, and volunteers who had never given up on finding justice for Taylor. They asked for privacy as they began the long process of healing, but they also promised to use their experience to help other families facing similar tragedies. As they walked away from the courthouse, Taylor's mother carried herself with a dignity that had sustained her family through the darkest period of their lives. 6 months after Fawley's sentencing, Taylor's mother found herself standing behind a podium at Virginia Commonwealth University, addressing a packed auditorium of students, faculty, and parents. She had never imagined herself as a public speaker, but Taylor's death had given her a mission she couldn't ignore. "My daughter Taylor was just like you," she began, looking out at the young faces in the audience. She was intelligent, trusting, and excited about her future. She thought she was invincible, the way all teenagers do. But she learned too late that predators exist, and they specifically target young people like her. The Campus Safety and Awareness Program had invited her to speak as part of their expanded safety education initiative. Taylor's case had exposed dangerous gaps in how young people understood online risks, and the university was determined to prevent future tragedies. "Benjamin Fawley spent weeks grooming my daughter through online conversations," she explained. "He presented himself as a mentor and father figure. He offered to help with her photography career. Every word was calculated to gain her trust and make her feel safe, meeting him alone." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. These students were the same age Taylor had been, facing the same decisions about how much to trust new people they met online. "I'm not here to scare you," Taylor's mother continued. "I'm here to educate you. The internet is a wonderful tool, but it's also a hunting ground for predators. They're sophisticated, patient, and skilled at manipulation." She shared specific warning signs students should watch for. Older individuals who seemed overly interested in personal details, people who tried to isolate them from friends and family, anyone who pushed for private meetings after brief online acquaintance. "If sharing Taylor's story can save even one life, then her death will have some meaning beyond our grief," she concluded. "Please, be careful, be smart, trust your instincts. And remember that my beautiful daughter trusted the wrong person, and it cost her everything." The bronze plaque was unveiled on September 5, 2009, exactly 4 years after Taylor's disappearance. It was mounted on a bench in a quiet corner of VCU's campus, surrounded by the photography garden that students and faculty had created in her memory. "In loving memory of Taylor Marie Behl, 1988 to 2005, the plaque read, "A bright light taken too soon. May her story inspire vigilance, safety, and the protection of all who seek knowledge and friendship." The dedication ceremony was small and private, attended only by Taylor's family, close friends, and the university officials who had worked to create the memorial. Taylor's mother ran her fingers over the raised letters of her daughter's name, feeling the permanence of the bronze beneath her touch. Dean Patricia Rodriguez spoke about Taylor's brief but meaningful time at VCU. "Taylor embodied everything we hope for in our students: curiosity, creativity, and openness to new experiences. While her time with us was tragically short, her impact continues through the safety programs and awareness initiatives her story has inspired." The photography garden featured plants that bloomed in different seasons, ensuring that color and beauty surrounded Taylor's memorial year-round. Student photographers often came here to work on assignments, and many said they felt inspired by Taylor's passion for capturing the world's beauty. A small plaque near the bench provided information about online safety resources and campus security services. It was Taylor's mother's idea. She wanted the memorial to serve not just as a remembrance, but as a practical tool for keeping other students safe. "This place will ensure Taylor is never forgotten," her father said quietly, placing flowers on the bench. "But more importantly, it will help protect other young people who are just starting their adult lives." The memorial bench became a place of reflection for the entire campus community. Students dealing with grief, fear, or difficult decisions often came here to think and find peace in the garden's quiet beauty. In the quiet of her living room, Taylor's mother sat surrounded by photo albums that chronicled her daughter's life from birth to 17. The prosecution had returned Taylor's camera and personal effects after the trial, but these earlier pictures held memories from before the nightmare began. Here was Taylor at age 3, covered in chocolate cake on her birthday. At 7, proudly displaying her first loose tooth. At 10, hugging the family dog who had been her constant companion. At 15, glowing with excitement after her first photography class. Each photo told a story of a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. This was the Taylor her mother wanted to remember, not the victim of a horrible crime, but the vibrant young woman who had brought joy to everyone who knew her. She was always behind a camera, even as a little girl, her mother said to her husband, who sat beside her sharing the memories. Remember how she used to line up her stuffed animals and pretend to take their portraits? The childhood photos revealed Taylor's personality in ways that crime scene evidence and court testimony never could. Her natural pose in every picture, the way she always seemed to be moving or laughing, the creativity that showed in how she arranged her toys and decorations. There were family vacation photos, birthday parties, school events, and quiet moments at home. A normal childhood, filled with the experiences every parent hopes to give their child. Nothing in these pictures hinted at the tragedy that would end Taylor's story. She had so much life left to live, her father said, studying a photo of Taylor at her high school graduation just months before her death. So many pictures she never got to take. The albums became a refuge for Taylor's parents, a place where their daughter was still alive and their family was still whole. In these photos, Taylor would always be 17, forever young, forever full of dreams. Benjamin Fawley adapted to prison life with the same cold calculation he had used to stalk his victims. His cell at Wallens Ridge State Prison was small and Spartan, a narrow bed, a metal toilet, a tiny desk where he could write letters that were read by prison officials before being mailed. He received mail regularly, though most of it was hate mail from people who had followed Taylor's case in the media. Prison officials screened out the most threatening correspondence, but Fawley still received dozens of letters, telling him exactly what writers thought of men who preyed on young women. "You took a beautiful life," one letter read. "You deserve every miserable day you spend in that cell." Fawley rarely responded to his mail. He had learned that engagement only encouraged more correspondence, and he preferred the isolation of his daily routine. He woke at 6 a.m., ate breakfast in the common area, worked his assigned job in the prison laundry, ate lunch and dinner at prescribed times, and was locked in his cell by 9 p.m. Other inmates knew what he had done. Information travels quickly in prison, and child killers and predators occupy the bottom of the correctional hierarchy. Fawley had been threatened several times and had requested protective custody, but prison officials determined that general population was appropriate for his case. During his first year in prison, Fawley wrote several letters to Taylor's family, attempting to express remorse for his actions. All were returned unopened. The family had made it clear through their attorney that they wanted no contact with their daughter's killer. 20 years remained until his first possibility of parole. By then, Fawley would be 58 years old, and Taylor's family would have the opportunity to oppose his release. In his cell at night, he had plenty of time to think about the choices that had led him to this 8 by 10-foot room where he would spend the next 2 decades of his life. The glossy brochure featured Taylor's smiling face on the cover, along with the title Online Safety, Protecting Yourself in the Digital Age. It was distributed at colleges across Virginia and eventually nationwide, part of a comprehensive awareness campaign that grew from the advocacy work of Taylor's family. Inside, the brochure outlined the warning signs that students should watch for when interacting with strangers online. It explained how predators use seemingly innocent conversations to gather personal information, build trust, and eventually lure victims into dangerous situations. Taylor Behl was a bright, talented young woman who had her whole life ahead of her, the introduction read. She was also trusting and kind, qualities that made her vulnerable to a predator who took advantage of her generous nature. The brochure included specific safety tips. Never meet online contacts alone. Always tell someone where you're going and when you expect to return. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, and verify the identity of anyone you meet through the internet. Taylor's mother had worked with campus safety experts and law enforcement professionals to develop the content. Every recommendation was based on real cases and proven safety strategies, but Taylor's story provided the emotional weight that made students pay attention. If this brochure prevents even one tragedy, then Taylor's death will have served a purpose beyond our grief, her mother wrote in the foreword. The awareness campaign expanded beyond printed materials to include online resources, campus presentations, and training programs for residence hall advisors and campus security personnel. Universities began implementing new protocols for responding to missing student reports and improved coordination between campus and local law enforcement. 5 years after Taylor's death, dozens of schools had adopted comprehensive comprehensive safety programs based on lessons learned from her case. Her name became synonymous with the need for vigilance in an increasingly connected world, and her story continued to educate and protect young people who faced the same choices she had encountered. Professor Michael Rodriguez opened his criminal investigation textbook to Chapter 15, Digital Age Evidence Collection. The case study featured prominently was Virginia v. Fawley, the Taylor Behl murder investigation, which had become a standard example of how modern police work had adapted to crimes involving internet predators. This case demonstrates the critical importance of digital forensics in contemporary criminal investigations. Professor Rodriguez explained to his classroom of criminal justice students at George Mason University, 20 years ago, investigators would have had limited leads when Taylor Behl disappeared, but her online communications provided the key evidence that led to her killer. The textbook detailed how investigators had reconstructed Taylor's digital footprint, tracing her conversations with Benjamin Fawley through multiple platforms and devices. It explained the legal procedures required for seizing and searching computers, and the technical expertise needed to recover deleted files and hidden communications. Students studied the timeline of the investigation, learning how federal and local agencies coordinated their efforts and shared resources. The case highlighted both the opportunities and challenges of investigating crimes that cross jurisdictional boundaries and involved multiple forms of electronic evidence. The Behl case also illustrates the evolution of predatory behavior in the internet age. The textbook noted, Fawley used sophisticated grooming techniques that were relatively new in 2005 but have since become common patterns that investigators learned to recognize. One student raised her hand during the lecture. Do you think this case could be solved more quickly today? Professor Rodriguez considered the question carefully. Technology has advanced significantly since 2005. We have better tools for digital forensics, improved databases for sharing information between agencies, and more awareness of online predator behavior. But the fundamental challenge remains the same: building trust with victims' families while conducting a thorough investigation under intense public pressure. The case study would continue to be taught in criminal justice programs across the country, ensuring that future investigators understood both the techniques and the human impact of their work. The granite headstone was simple and elegant, exactly what Taylor would have chosen for herself. Her name and dates were carved in graceful script: Taylor Marie Behl, August 13, 1988, September 5, 2005. Beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Forever 17. Below her name was an engraving of a camera, a symbol of the passion that had defined her short life and had ultimately led to her death. Around the camera were carved the words, capturing beauty, creating joy. Taylor's family visited the grave every month, bringing fresh flowers and sharing news about their ongoing advocacy work. The cemetery had become a place of peace for them, where they could feel close to Taylor without the pain of the investigation and trial overwhelming their memories. I told her about the new scholarship program today, her mother said, arranging pink roses near the headstone. The Taylor Behl Photography Scholarship for incoming VCU students. She would have been so proud that her name is helping other young artists pursue their dreams. Her father knelt beside the little brassic date grave, brushing fallen leaves from the base of the stone. 5 years, he said quietly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Other visitors had left small tokens at the graveside: cameras, photography books, flowers from strangers who had been touched by Taylor's story. A small weatherproof box contained notes from visitors, many of them young women who wrote about how Taylor's story had made them more careful about online safety. The cemetery was peaceful, surrounded by old oak trees and rolling hills. It was the kind of place Taylor would have loved to photograph, capturing the interplay of light and shadow among the monuments and memorials. As the sun set behind the trees, Taylor's parents stood together at their daughter's grave, holding hands and remembering the bright, trusting girl who had brought so much joy to their lives. She would rest here always, forever young, forever loved, forever remembered.